Tehran 1979. The streets shook beneath millions of angry voices. American flags burned in the crowds, while banks collapsed into flames and soldiers fired into protesters above. The chaos, one man's face appeared everywhere: Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini. For the United States, the scene felt impossible because, for decades, Iran had been one of America's closest allies in the Middle East. Washington helped build the Shah's military. American companies flooded Iran's economy. The United States even helped launch Iran's nuclear program years before the revolution. But now the monarchy America supported was collapsing before the entire world. So what went wrong? How did one of Washington's strongest allies become one of its greatest enemies almost overnight? And how did the United States completely misjudge the anger growing inside Iran? Tonight, we uncover the real story behind one of the most important revolutions of the 20th century, a story of oil, Cold War politics, secret CIA operations, royal ambition, religious resistance, and a revolution nobody truly saw coming. This is the story of how America lost Iran. Welcome to History Ledger. Tonight we journey into the rise and collapse of the Shah of Iran, from the CIA-backed coup of 1953 to the revolution that transformed the Middle East forever. This is not simply the story of politics or war. It is the story of what happens when a government appears powerful on the surface while beneath it an entire society quietly moves toward revolution. And by the time Washington realized the danger, it was already too late. In the early 1950s, Iran stood at a crossroads between empire nationalism and the growing Cold War. The country was ruled by a young monarch, Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, but real political power increasingly rested with Iran's elected parliament. And its popular prime minister, Mohammad Mossadegh Massoud, was not a communist revolutionary. He was a nationalist, and his biggest target was oil. For decades, Britain had dominated Iran's oil industry through the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, a foreign corporation that controlled enormous profits while many ordinary Iranians remained poor. To millions inside Iran, the arrangement felt humiliating. So, in 1951, Mossadegh made a decision that shocked the world. He nationalized Iran's oil industry. Crowds celebrated him as a hero, but in London alarm bells rang immediately. Britain feared not only losing oil, but losing influence over Iran itself, and soon the British found an ally in Washington. By the early 1950s, the Cold War was reshaping global politics. American leaders feared Soviet influence spreading across the Middle East. Iran bordered the Soviet Union directly, making it strategically vital to President Dwight Eisenhower's administration. Instability inside Iran looked dangerous. American officials worried that political chaos could eventually open the door to communism. British intelligence argued the same thing. Together, the United Kingdom and the United States prepared a secret operation. Its code name was Operation Ajax. In 1953, the CIA and British intelligence agencies launched one of the most famous covert operations of the Cold War. Their mission was simple: remove Mossadeghia operatives, funded anti-government propaganda, organized political pressure campaigns, and helped stir unrest inside Tehran. Street demonstrations erupted, violence spread through the capital. Then, finally, in August 1953, Mossadegh's government collapsed. Shah, who had briefly fled the country during the crisis, returned to Iran stronger than before. Washington. The operation appeared to be a major victory. American officials believed they had prevented Soviet influence and secured a loyal ally in the Middle East, but many Iranians saw the events very differently. To them, a democratically elected leader had been removed with foreign help, and the memory of that humiliation would never fully disappear. After the coup, the relationship between Iran and the United States deepened rapidly. The Shah became one of Washington's most trusted partners. In the region, American money, weapons, advisors, and businesses poured into Iran. The Shah promised modernization and For a time the results looked impressive. Roads expanded across the country, factories multiplied, universities grew. Tehran transformed into one of the most modern cities in the Middle East. Western fashion, American movies, luxury hotels, and foreign corporations became symbols of Iran's new future. The Shah believed he could turn Iran into a global power, and the United States encouraged that vision every step of the way. Even Iran's nuclear ambitions began with American support. Under President Eisenhower's Atoms for Peace program, the United States promoted civilian nuclear technology among allied nations. Iran became one of the participants. In 1967, the United States helped Iran establish the Tehran Research Reactor, the country's first nuclear reactor. Washington also supplied enriched uranium fuel and technical assistance. At the time, American officials viewed Iran as stable, friendly, and firmly aligned with Western interests. Few imagined that this same country would one day become one of America's greatest geopolitical rivals. Throughout the 1960s, the Shah pushed Iran toward rapid modernization. Women gained voting rights, education expanded dramatically, new industries emerged, oil revenues fueled enormous construction projects. To many outside observers, Iran looked like a success story, modernizing monarchy aligned with the West, a powerful barrier against Soviet expansion. But beneath the surface another Iran existed, one far away from royal palaces and wealthy neighborhoods. Many religious leaders viewed Western influence as a threat to Islamic identity. Rural communities struggled with economic disruption. Corruption spread among elites connected to the monarchy, and increasingly ordinary people began to feel that the Shah ruled not for Iran but for himself and the foreign powers backing him. By the late 1960s, Washington believed Iran was one of the most stable countries in the Middle East. The Shah appeared powerful, the economy was growing, alliance with America looked stronger than ever. But beneath the image of stability, anger was quietly growing, and soon the United States would discover that loyalty, built through power and fear, could disappear almost overnight. By the 1970s, Iran appeared unstoppable. Oil money flooded into the country at historic levels. Tehran sparkled with new highways, luxury hotels, modern banks, and massive construction projects. Foreign journalists called Iran the rising superpower of the Middle East. American presidents praised the Shah as a dependable ally to Washington. The alliance looked stronger than ever. But beneath the surface of prosperity, another reality was spreading across Iran, a reality built on fear, inequality, and growing resentment. The Shah believed he could transform Iran into a modern, Western-style nation through rapid reform. His program became known as the White Revolution. Land reforms broke apart traditional estates, industries expanded rapidly, millions gained access to education, women received greater legal rights and voting rights. New factories and infrastructure projects appeared across the country. From the outside, the reforms looked revolutionary, and the United States strongly supported them. American officials viewed the Shah as a modernizer who could stabilize the Middle East while resisting Soviet influence during the Cold War. But modernization came at a cost, and many Iranians felt they were losing control over their own society. Iran's rapid transformation created enormous wealth, but not for everyone. Oil revenues enriched royal elites, military leaders, and businessmen connected to the monarchy. Meanwhile, inflation and corruption spread across the country. In rural regions, many farmers struggled after land reforms disrupted traditional systems. Without providing long-term stability, thousands migrated to overcrowded cities searching for work, and while Tehran's upper classes embraced Western culture, many conservative and religious communities felt increasingly alienated to them. Iran's identity was disappearing beneath foreign influence. Nightclubs, alcohol, American movies, and European fashion became symbols of a country changing too fast. The Shah saw modernization. Many ordinary Iranians saw humiliation, but economic frustration alone did not create a revolution. Fear did. To crush opposition, the Shah relied heavily on Savak Iran's feared intelligence and secret police organization, created with assistance from American and Israeli intelligence services SAVAK, became one of the most powerful institutions in Iran. Its agents monitored universities, newspapers, mosques, and political organizations. Critics of the monarchy were arrested, interrogated, imprisoned, and sometimes tortured. Writers disappeared, students vanished, political dissent became dangerous. Over time, fear spread through nearly every part of Iranian society. Publicly, many people praised the Shah. Privately, anger continued to grow, but inside Washington few believed the monarchy was truly at risk. One voice, however, refused to remain silent: Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, a powerful Shiite cleric. Khomeini openly condemned the Shah's reforms and his close relationship with the United States. He accused the monarchy of corruption, repression, and surrendering Iran's independence to foreign powers. In 1963, massive protests erupted after Khomeini's arrest. The Shah crushed the demonstrations with force. Soon afterward, Khomeini was exiled from Iran, first to Iraq, later to France, but exile did not silence him. Instead, his influence spread even further. His speeches were secretly recorded onto cassette tapes and smuggled back into Iran. Inside mosques, homes, and bazaars, Iranians listened carefully as Khomeini denounced the Shah and called for Islamic resistance. Year after year, his message gained strength, and still American officials underestimated him. In 1971, the Shah staged one of the most extravagant celebrations in modern history to commemorate 2,500 years of Persian monarchy. Enormous ceremonies were held near the ancient ruins of Persepolis. Foreign royalty and world leaders attended lavish banquets beneath enormous luxury tents flown in from Europe. The celebration cost hundreds of millions of dollars. While elites celebrated in luxury, many Iranians watched in frustration. Event became a symbol of everything critics hated about the monarchy: wealth, distance from ordinary people, and obsession with image. Yet, internationally, the Shah still appeared untouchable. Iran possessed one of the largest militaries in the region. The United States sold billions of dollars in advanced weapons to Tehran. American intelligence reports repeatedly described Iran as stable. In 1977, even President Jimmy Carter publicly praised Iran as an island of stability in one of the most troubled regions of the world. But the reality inside Iran was changing faster than Washington understood. By the late 1970s, protests were becoming more frequent. Students demonstrated against censorship, religious leaders condemned corruption, workers protested inflation and economic inequality, and increasingly different groups across society began uniting around one shared enemy: the Shah. Years of repression had destroyed moderate opposition movements. Now more radical voices filled the vacuum among millions of Iranians. The monarchy no longer looked powerful, it looked isolated and dangerous. Still, American policymakers believed the Shah could survive. After all, he controlled the military, he controlled the economy, and he controlled the state. But revolutions are rarely defeated by strength alone. Sometimes they grow silently beneath the surface until the entire system collapses at once. For decades, the United States had measured Iran through military alliances, oil production, and geopolitical strategy. But Washington failed to measure something far more dangerous: public anger. The Shah had built a modern state backed by immense power, yet every year the gap between the government and the people widened further, and by 1978, that gap was about to explode into revolution. Iran, 1978. For years the Shah had appeared untouchable. He commanded one of the strongest militaries in the Middle East. He possessed immense oil wealth, and he enjoyed the full backing of the United States. Now suddenly the streets were turning against him. What began as scattered demonstrations was transforming into something far larger: a revolution. And neither the Shah nor Washington truly understood how fast events were spiraling out of control. Crisis exploded in January 1978. An Iranian government newspaper published an article attacking Ayatollah Khomeini, accusing the exiled cleric of being a foreign agent and enemy of Iran. The Reaction was immediate. Religious students in the city of Qom flooded the streets in protest. Security forces opened fire. Several demonstrators were killed. Instead of crushing dissent, the violence ignited it. Shiite tradition mourning ceremonies are held 40 days after a death, so 40 days later, new protests erupted to honor those killed in Qom. Then more people died, and 40 days after that, even larger protests began. The cycle repeated again and again across Iran. Every funeral created new demonstrations. Every crackdown created more anger. The movement spread from city to city like wildfire. By mid-1978, millions of Iranians were joining the protest. Students marched beside religious conservatives, factory workers marched beside intellectuals, nationalists, leftists, clerics, and ordinary citizens, united against one man. These Shah crowds filled the streets of Tehran chanting for revolution. Banks were attacked, government buildings burned, strikes crippled major industries. Then came the most devastating blow of all. Oil workers walked off the job. Iran's economy began to freeze. The monarchy was losing control, and still the Shah hesitated between compromise and repression. He promised reforms one week and ordered crackdowns the next. The confusion only deepened the chaos. Then came September 8, 1978, a day that would become known as Black Friday. Thousands of protesters gathered in Tehran's Yala Square, despite martial law imposed by the government. Soldiers surrounded the crowds. Then the shooting began. Gunfire echoed through the square. Panic erupted. Smoke and screams filled the streets. Exact number of deaths remains disputed even today, but the psychological impact was undeniable for many Iranians. Black Friday destroyed any remaining hope of compromise with the monarchy. After the massacre, the revolution accelerated dramatically. The Shah's government was no longer feared, it was hated inside Washington. Confusion spread rapidly. For decades, American officials had viewed Iran as stable and loyal. Now, intelligence reports became increasingly contradictory. Some advisors urged full support for the Shah. Others believed reforms were necessary. Few truly understood the scale of public anger sweeping across Iran. The CIA had failed to predict the revolution. American policymakers had spent years focusing on Iran's military strength and strategic value while overlooking the social and religious forces growing beneath the surface. Even as millions filled the streets, many officials still believed the Shah could survive. But time was running out. By late 1978, Iran was nearly paralyzed. Strikes shut down newspapers, banks, airports, and oil production. Government authority collapsed across much of the country. The Shah himself appeared exhausted, isolated, and increasingly uncertain. Then, finally, on January 16, 1979, the Shah left Iran officially. It was described as a temporary departure, but millions understood the truth immediately. Monarchy was finished as the Shah's airplane disappeared into the sky. Crowds flooded the streets in celebration. Some cried with joy, others danced openly in public squares. For many Iranians, it felt like the end of decades of dictatorship, but an even larger transformation was still coming. Only weeks later, Ayatollah Khomeini returned from exile. The scene was extraordinary. Millions of Iranians packed the streets to welcome him home. After nearly 15 years outside the country, the exiled cleric had become the face of the revolution. Shah's government collapsed completely soon afterward. Military units surrendered, officials fled. The monarchy that had ruled Iran for generations vanished within weeks. In its place rose a new political system, the Islamic Republic of Iran. For the United States, the consequences were enormous. One of America's closest allies in the Middle East had transformed into one of its fiercest adversaries almost overnight. Later, in 1979, tensions between Iran and the United States exploded again after the Shah was allowed into America for medical treatment. Revolutionary students stormed the United States Embassy in Tehran. Dozens of American diplomats were taken hostage. The crisis would last 444 days. Television audiences across the world watched as relations between the two countries collapsed completely. For many Americans, the hostage crisis became the defining image of revolutionary Iran. But For many Iranians, the deeper story stretched back decades to the coup of 1953, foreign influence, and years of resentment against the Shah's rule. The Iranian Revolution shocked the world because so many powerful governments failed to see it coming. The United States believed Iran was stable because the state appeared strong. But beneath the military parades, oil wealth, and royal ceremonies, public anger had been building for years. America had invested heavily in the Shah, yet it misunderstood the society beneath him. Revolution of 1979 did more than overthrow a king. It reshaped the Middle East, transformed global politics, and created a rivalry between Iran and the United States that still shapes the world today. The Iranian Revolution was more than the fall of a king. It was the collapse of an entire political vision. For decades, the United States believed military strength, oil alliances, and economic modernization were enough to secure loyalty inside Iran. But history proved something far more dangerous. A government can appear stable even while anger grows silently beneath it. The Shah possessed wealth, weapons, foreign support, and one of the strongest armies in the Middle East, yet none of it could stop millions of people once the revolution truly began. And the consequences of 1979 still shape global politics today. The rivalry between Iran and the United States, the tensions across the Middle East, and even modern debates surrounding Iran's nuclear program all trace part of their roots back to the events you watched in this story. Because history never truly disappears, its consequences continue long after the revolution ends. And perhaps the most haunting part of all, the United States spent decades building an alliance that collapsed in only a matter of months. Thank you for watching History Ledger. If you enjoyed this documentary and want more deeply researched historical stories told in cinematic detail, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next journey into history. And if this story moved you, let us know in the comments what moment from the Iranian Revolution stayed with you the most. Until next time, stay curious and keep history alive.